Okay, here we are again with Pat McART in Donegal and myself in lonely old Antrim. I can't get this damned video or Zoom system to fill the screen with the speaker this time, so we'll just have to make do with the best we can. Okay, Pat, I'm looking behind you there. I have the most impressive bookshelf I have ever seen. I don't know what the books are. Maybe they're porn, who knows? But they look very impressive from here. Do you want to say anything about them? Does that comfort you to be in a room like that?
Yeah, I'm a bibliophile, I suppose is a word. I don't know, Jude. I've been collecting books. I really should throw a lot of them away, but I don't. I grew up in an era when a book was an important thing. And, you know, there weren't a lot of books when I was growing up. And then as I got older, I started, other people collected different things. I was a voracious reader. For some reason, you know the old thing that they talk about a film or something like that. When I read a book, I went into that world, you know, I got lost in it. When I was a young fellow, I loved Westerns, you know. I remember there was a guy called Shane Gray. I loved him.
Oh, remember him well. Remember him well. He used to pass around the college.
Exactly. And I think the first book that really got me big time, I think it might have been 12 or 13, was Shane. In fact, you know how big it got me? I named my first son Shane. The whole story of Shane is written by a man called Jack Schaefer. It was a great film too.
Yeah, it was a great movie. Who was the guy? Who was Shane in that?
Alan Ladd, if I remember correctly.
That's right. Yes. And they called at the end, "Come back, Shane, come back."
Yeah, come back. It was heartbreaking at the end. Yeah. But the funniest thing was that I read Shane when I was about 12, and I read it again when I was about 30, and it's two different books.
Really?
You really don't get the book when you're 12. But by the way, perfect story for a 12-year-old, and really? It's a perfect story. Yeah. But you understand what was going on between Shane and the father of the young fella.
Yeah.
Shane would come to the house, and there was a tension between the father and Shane because the mother was a good-looking woman and whatever.
Yeah.
But you didn't get that when you were 12. You know.
Right. Who put you on? Was it just? You see, we all read comics or semi-comics at the time. Did somebody must have given you a nudge towards books, though? Is that everybody read comics, but not everybody read books afterwards?
No. There was a family up above, and I know I annoyed the hell of them. They used to all get comics, and we didn't. So I would say I would get 2 or 3 comics a day, and I'd be up at their house and looking for more. You know, for some reason, books really the whole. And you're dead right. I remember the Beano. I think it was Tiger, and there was something else. And
the Topper.
Topper. I read them all. In fact,
did that lead into books, though, Pat? What was it that made you to go to having a well-stocked shelves today? There must have been somebody that turned you on to reading itself.
Yeah, I can't really answer that. It was just something I was innate, something that was in me. I always
wasn't any individual that encouraged you?
You know, here's a very strange thing. Academically at school, I don't think I would won any awards, but towards the end of my primary school, or as they call it here, national school, I remember we had about a month with nothing to do. And the Christian brother, I can't remember his name now, he's just to keep me quiet. One day he gave me a book. He says, you know, you're leaving, so there's nothing you can do now. So he gave me a book, and I went into this world. I was set in Canada, in the woods in Canada, and there was a guy, he had a dog, a red setter, and all the rest of it. Now, I read that book, and I went into a different world. And I think that's what gave, you know, it took me out of this world, and I could see the big, you know, trees and the forestry and the, you know, the river running through it type thing. And my imagination went.
Yeah. Were you brought up? Were there houses right around you? Were there boys at school with you? Were they living close to you?
Yeah, I was brought up in what they call a council estate in Letterkenny. It was called Archbalm-Killay on a road. You know, back then, nobody had money, and I think back, it was a lovely estate, and the people there were fantastic, you know. It was now being considered middle class, but back then it was definitely working class.
You see, I'm asking you that because I grew up on a farm a mile outside Oma. And I put it down to the two things that I got to love reading. One was there was nobody to play with. Oh, I used to envy the boys in Oma that were, I only had to open the front door and down the street and they'd meet some of their mates and they could play with them. Whereas we were out, all I had was my sisters, big sisters, So the loneliness of it was the first thing. Second thing was I had two older brothers and one of them at least had got onto this thing of these paperbacks, the Pendulums and the Pelicans, the crime stories and detective stories and so on. And they just left those lying around the house. So when I hadn't anything to do, I picked these up and started reading. And that was, I think, the key thing for me, because there was no choice. If I'd had some mates outside the door, I wouldn't have opened the book.
No, I can't say that either, Jude. I don't know what it was. I'd always just sing. My mother was a great reader. We had a rule in our house: never give her the newspaper. Because if she got the newspaper, you didn't see it for a couple of hours. Like, I think she was the only woman that actually read, not only the news, but the classified ads, the obituary columns and all the rest of it. And quite literally, if you give her the evening press, the Irish press, you wouldn't get it back. On a Sunday, the rule.
That was your model? You had a model there, Pat?
Yeah, I think that, and she was big into all sorts of things like that. And she definitely was. But then you'd always see my father. Strange thing. I went to RT as a journalist in 1980, and I was sent down to the subs desk, and for training. And I was only down about an hour. And the chief sub says to me, he says, "I'm wasting my time with you." He says, "You already know this." And what I didn't realise was a simple thing. My father, when he got up at 7 o'clock in the morning, put on RT News. And before he left the house, he put on the headlines. He'd come back in for his lunch at we call dinner time at 1 o'clock, and he put on the RT News. At 6 o'clock, he'd put on the RT News, and at 9 o'clock, he would have on the RT News. When I went to RT as a journalist, somewhere in by the process of osmosis or whatever word you want to use, I already knew their style. So I stood up. That is one thing I remember. I was only on the desk for about an hour. And the chief sub said to me, "I'm wasting my time." He says, "You already know the style." So it's amazing what you really pick up.
Well, have books, is there a book that stands out in all those books behind you, and others, I'm sure? Is there a book that stands out for you, Pat, that either changed your life or one that you remember vividly, most fondly?
There's a book there called Eleni. And
what's the name of it again?
Eleni. It's a true story, but it reads like a novel that you wouldn't believe. It's the true story of a guy. He was Greek originally, and went to America and became a crime writer with the New York Times. But there was something always in the back of his mind. During the Greek Civil War, his mother had been murdered during the Civil War, and it was all political and all the rest. And he goes back to Greece to sort of, what would you say, go back over what happened to his mother. And he tells the whole story about the fact that the Civil War and about the atrocities and all. Now, there's not a big thing, but it's a very, very human story. Mm-hmm. But it reads like a detective novel. It goes from who was there the day that she was lifted by the partisans, and who told the story on her and all the rest of it. It's a brilliant, brilliant story. And it got it's called Nicolas Gage. Not Cage. There's an actor called Nicolas Gage. Nicolas Gage. I think his real name is Nicolas Gage Jalopez, or something like that. But obviously for American phonetics, they call themselves Nicolas Gage. But it's a book that I've rarely heard. But it's a book that has stayed with me. And the other one was one night I started reading Sophie's Choice. You ever come across that one?
Yes.
I started reading that at 12 o'clock, or not 12 o'clock. That's ridiculous. I started reading it about 9 o'clock one Friday night. And Rosie met me going to bed at 7:30 on a Saturday morning. I kept saying, I must go to bed now, but I had to keep reading the other chapter. I think it was by William Styron. So that's a sort of books sort of stayed with me. And of course, Shane, I mentioned earlier on.
Would you prefer fiction now? Did you find yourself moving into fiction as you grew older, or away from fiction to non-fiction as you grew older?
I'm sort of moving away from fiction to a large degree.
Most people
I read, strange thing is last while, Jude, I don't know why I'm doing it. I read Tim Pat Coogan's 1916, The Mornings After.
Yeah.
And a friend in America sent me a book. It's big over there, but not over here for some reason. Now it's been written by Say Nothing. It's the whole story behind or around Jean McConville, the troubles in Belfast and all the rest. It's written by an American journalist. No, it's got rave reviews, but it hasn't had any sort of what would you say, consciousness over here. Like I hadn't heard of it until she sent it to me. So I'm now starting to read that, and it is excellent. But it's written in a very American style. You know, the guy has done a hell of a lot of research. In fact, the notations and the all the rest must have taken about a month.
What about you know, the fact is that kids aren't at school now. They're like ourselves, they're locked down, and people are saying, you know, oh, there'll be all sorts of changes in the way schooling and work and everything else is delivered. You know, you have a lot more stuff online.
Yeah.
I just wonder, leave aside the method, the online or face-to-face thing, but do you think kids should be exposed to, as they are in secondary school, really great books by Dickens or whoever, or plays by Shakespeare for that matter, or poetry by Wordsworth, whose 250th anniversary is today?
Oh, only an English teacher would know that. Jude, I have a friend. He's dead now.
Most kids hate it. John said that he never wanted his plays taught in schools because the kids would learn to hate him the way they hated Shakespeare.
Aye. Well, put it right. I have a friend. He's dead now. He was Kevin O'Doherty. He was a parish priest on the next parish up. And he went to the same school as I went to. Now, he went there some years before me. And we were sitting chatting one night, and he says, "Hey, Pat, do you ever think, you know," he says, "were we educated at all?" He says, "Did they ever play," he says, "really great music so we could sit and listen to it? Did they ever teach us a language? Like we did Latin and Greek and stuff like that." He says, what about Spanish? What about Italian?" He says, "Did they ever sort of read us passages from some great books and say, go on, listen to this?" He says, "We were like," he says, "rats on a treadmill. You have to pass this exam. And look, we're not interested in the finer things in life. Never mind art, never mind music, never mind literature. Here's a poem by Shakespeare, learn it. Here's a play by Shakespeare, learn it. And you know, you get 6 honours and you're leaving. You go to university and you become a teacher or an accountant or a lawyer, whatever." But he says, there's no appreciation of the beauty of things, you know, like where's the great architecture? What was Leonardo da Vinci about? You know, like what was Bach or Beethoven about? And you know, someone, Jude, he was right. It was learning by rote, not for love of learning. And like I understand that and all the rest of it, but you know, it was a bit of a failed system. It was all about exams.
That'll be exactly my own experience as well. And we used to have to learn off, you know, Shelley and Keats and so on.
Yeah,
I hated it. I hated that part of it. But you know, the older I get, my head is now, there's verses from Shelley and Keats and so on in my head. And when I'm out for a walk or I'm sitting in my chair looking out the window, I think it's bloody marvellous that I've got those lines tumbling around inside my head. Your head has to be filled with something. So why not at an early age implant, and you see kids soak it up at a very early age. Plant that, and even they don't like it at the time, maybe throughout the rest of their lives, no?
Well, it's like, remember the kids who were sent to piano lessons and absolutely hated it, or guitar lessons and sat for hours and their fingers sore and they hated their mother and father for sending them. And then 20 years later, they're sitting someone saying, "Isn't this the greatest thing? You can entertain yourself for hours, and you can, you know, if you want to learn a new tune, suddenly, hold on, what was that note again?" And you know, the creative passion and fun they get from all that, and the fulfillment they get from it, you know. So maybe it's like everything, Jude. Maybe there's you know, what's that old one about the boxers? No pain without gain, or no gain without pain. You know, maybe that's the way. Maybe that's what the human existence is about. You have to do something like that.
You're talking about music, for example, or we were talking about books earlier on. Those are things that you, as you can see, you can love and enjoy further right throughout the rest of your life, and maybe appreciate them even more. But is it not true that about 90% of the stuff we learned at school was garbage? I mean, it was not garbage, but it had nothing to do with our lives, like trigonometry and algebra and science. I mean,
Jude, I know what they call it, maybe someone like geometry. We did geometry and algebra. Well, right. Let me tell you something. I have never ever used algebra from the day I've left school,
What?
and you know,
Shocking.
and geometry. You know, okay, maybe some builder somewhere needs it to find out what's a right angle or whatever, but I've never used it. So now
See,
I'm not saying.
yeah, I was going to say,
No,
you could multiply that by 10 for lots of other subjects. 90% of the subjects, as you said earlier, you're just doing it so you can jump through an exam hoop.
yeah, and that's what. And I'm not sure. Jude, like, you're an educator. I never was in the education. Well, I did a little bit of teaching, very small. But unlike you, you know, you've spent your life in teaching. I am not sure what is the best way to teach kids and how you get the best results of them. And I don't know of how we taught in the past. Right? But one thing I was certain, going home and having to learn 5 or 6 stanzas of some stupid poem. By the way, unlike you, I certainly do not remember any poetry. And now, sometimes when somebody starts quoting something, it comes back to me.
Yes.
But that's all sort of untoward rather than deliberate. You know, suddenly, oh wait a minute, I remember that. You know, but I think, see, when someone's sort of forced, are you really learning? I'm not even sure that's learning. You know, learning is when you love something, I think. But I would need to think about that a lot more than just spew it out there.
Well, they say the thing that sort of the line we used to be fed was, well, you may not appreciate it now, but you will in another 10, 20 years. And in some ways they were right, you know. Like we used to be doing Shakespeare's tragedies when we were 14 or 15. What did we know about Shakespeare's tragedies, which were about life and, you know, the most profound things in life? We knew sweet damn all about that. But now, you know, I can come to those and say, geez, that's amazing.
Like I came across that thing there about the Merchant of Venice, and, you know, what Shakespeare was 1524 or something, wasn't it? Right, way back. That's 500 years or whatever it is, or nearly 1564, whatever it was, nearly 500 years. But he was talking about the Jewish thing, and about, if you prick us, do we not bleed? If we tickle us, do we not laugh?
Yeah.
Well, there's the first really mention of discrimination, and you know, what would you say, sectarianism, or whatever you want to call that. You know, and he was addressing it way back 500 years ago. So, like, when you think about it, it's still relevant today.
Yeah, I love how succinctly he put it too. You know, he did. Yeah. That's what sectarianism is all about, or the failure. Where you say,
do you understand the other?
Because do we not bleed? If you, the other thing was, no, do we not laugh?
If you tickle us, do we not laugh? Yeah.
That's what all the whole notion of being fair to people is about. Where you put yourself in their shoes.
Yeah, but the thing about reading books, Jude. What I remember is, I'll leave it to this because I know you're going to move. I was when I was 15, I was working in a bar. It was totally illegal, but I was working in a bar, and in Letterkenny. And this fella came in. Now, when he got drunk, he was a royal pain. But see, when he came in at the start, he was always a lovely man. But anyway, he says to me one day, he says, "What are you doing?" I says, "I'm at school." And he says, "What are you doing?" I says, "Well, I read a lot." He says, "Aren't you lucky?" And this guy was an old farmer, and I says, "Why do you say that?" He says, "You're getting a chance to read the best minds, you know, the work of the best minds." And he says, "That's educating you." And he says, "I never got that chance." And I thought about it after, you know, by the way, he put it much, much better than I'm just after. But it was a brilliant thought that he had. In other words, I was getting the chance to get educated by reading books that the great minds had written. And they're taking in their views and learning about the world and learning about what's going on around me, trying to make sense of, you know, the creation and all that. He said when he had left, as young, he'd gone off to work on a farm and all the rest of it. I thought it was the so-called uneducated man had actually come out with a far more profound thing than I had ever thought of.
Yeah, very good. I'll just leave you this thought, Pat. See, when I see you with that, or anybody with a whole array of books behind them as a setting, I think they can't be all bad. I mean the people.
If you take the time to read, you must take time to think.
Yeah. I think it's sort of a civilizing thing. Like anytime I go to a library, a public library, and I see somebody in there, I say to myself, "Oh, I kind of like that person," you know.
Yeah, I've got to admit, I don't disagree with that that observation.
Okay, Pat, we'll leave it there, will we?
Yes.
There's terrible constraints of time, but we'll ask the punters what they think. Okay.